What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another video. Today is the final video where we're taking a look at my top 3 new commons from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Today we're taking a look at 3 new white cards that were printed at the common rarity that came out in this set. So we're going to take a look at exactly what the card does and how each of these cards could possibly fit into the existing metagame. But before we get any further, if you would like to support the channel, if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate that. And with that said, let's get into it. So the first card we're looking at today is Outlaw Medic for 1 generic and a white. You get a human rogue with lifelink, and when Outlaw Medic dies, draw a card. It is a 1/3. So there's honestly a lot to unpack with this card. It is a very decent card. It seems like it would want to go in an aristocrats type list. As of right now, that deck doesn't really exist. I think there are lots of people out there trying out aristocrat type decks, and though there's just as of as of now, it just doesn't seem like there is a lot of huge payoffs for those types of strategies, which is kind of sad because Aristocrats is definitely an archetype of Magic decks that I've always enjoyed playing, and I would love to see some more support for that in the future, and perhaps someone will figure out a way to make it work in Pauper. Would definitely love to see it. Alright, but this is a new white card with a death ability. So it lets you draw a card. So that really synergizes a lot with things like Deadly Dispute. So if you are in a deck that wants to be in both black and white, you definitely have a lot of options to get a bunch of value out of this card. So that is pretty cool. Also, this card has a lifelink. So we definitely really like that. Any way to gain life, with just how overclocked the red decks are right now, gaining life in any sort of way is very, very good. And, obviously this lets you draw a card when it dies, so that is also good. So it lets you fill up your hand a little bit. Also, it's a 1/3, and having that 3 toughness, I think, is very, very good in the format. Anything above 1 toughness, any creature above 1 toughness is going to be able to dodge the majority of the board wipes in the format, because a lot of them deal with 1 toughness creatures, either giving them -1/-1 or dealing 1 damage to all creatures and sometimes all players. Uh, but since this has 3 toughness, it gets around all the other board wipes, because all the other main board wipes in the format deal with 2 toughness, so either -2/-2 or 2 damage to everything. Um, there are some board wipes in the format in the forms of things like Crypt Rats, Croc Clan Shaman, as well as Pestilence that can basically, as long as you have enough mana or enough artifacts in the Shaman's case, can deal with creatures of really any toughness. But still, that 3 toughness is very, very relevant in the format, so this is definitely, like, for its mana cost being 2 mana, having a good body and having both lifelink and a death trigger, definitely makes this card very, very playable. Exactly where it's going to be played, I'm not really sure. Does Aristocrats, like I said, doesn't really have a deck right now, but still, it is a very solid card. And at our number 2 card today is Bridled Big Horn for 3 generic mana and a white. You get a sheep mount. And I think this might have been maybe the first mount that we have talked about from the new set. All right, so this one has vigilance. Whenever Bridled Big Horn attacks while saddled, create a 1/1 sheep creature token. You can also saddle it for 2. So you can tap any number of creatures that you control with total power 2 and saddle that card. And it is a 3/4. So at worst, this is a 3/4/4/4. Vigilance also can create more creatures. And going wide with a lot of creatures has been kind of proven to be a good strategy. This is a 4 mana spell though, so that is its big downside, is the mana cost, which is why I kind of have it lower in the list. Definitely not our top card that we're talking about today, but it's gonna be very easy with the saddle 2 to make this card saddled, and then you get start making more creatures. And after a while, you have a Guardian's Pledge come out and you're just swinging wide for lethal because you have a lot of sheep. And not to mention, this also has a 3/4 body, which means it's going to dodge most, if not all, of the board wipes in the format. So having 4 toughness is a huge deal. It also is a 3/4, which is going to be hard for a lot of decks to trade with this. Not to mention, it has vigilance, so it is a solid blocker as well. So this card definitely is, I think, for its mana cost, does a lot, creates more creatures, is also just a 3/4 vigilance, which is pretty good. The only really deck that I could possibly see this being run in, however, is Mono White Weenie, and as of right now, I'm not really sure I would want to run this in White Weenie, just because I think there are just a lot more mana efficient cards that are just better than this. Also, you have things like Battle Screech, which just creates 1/1s for you. Also has flashback, so you can do it twice. Certainly, this you as long as it's around, can do it multiple times as long as you have enough creatures to saddle it, or a creature with power 2 or more to saddle it. But really, this card will just die to a cast down. So that's, I think, the big argument against this, is this just dies to a lot of different targeted removal. Certainly can dodge a lightning bolt. They'll have to 2-for-1 you there. So that is a nice argument for this card. So I definitely can see a lot of arguments for and against this. I mean, it really comes down to the fact that a lot of Pauper decks have a much lower curve, and they're really not trying to play 4 mana spells. White Weenie is definitely one that can, because you do tend to play things like 3 or 4 mana spells in the forms of things like Battle Screech or Guardian's Pledge. So this could definitely maybe find a home in that. I'm not really sort of itching to make one for it, but it's still, this card still does quite a lot and would definitely be pretty good there. My top new white card from the set is gotta be Stagecoach Security. So for 4 generic mana and a white, you get a human soldier. When Stagecoach Security enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. You can also plot this card for 3 generic mana and a white, and it is a 4/5. So again, I think this is another card you might want to consider for White Weenie, as it basically gives a global buff to all of your creatures. Also gives them all vigilance, which is pretty good. I mean, we already have things like Eagles of the North, however, which I think fit into the deck a little bit better since it allows you to fetch lands. But this does have a plot cost. So if you basically want to sacrifice a turn by plotting this, you have a free spell on the following turn. So if you could give him +1/+1 in vigilance, do a Guardian's Pledge, suddenly you're swinging for quite a lot of damage. So this, I think, could definitely find a home in White Weenie for sure. It is a 5 mana spell, and it does cost you 4 mana to plot this card. So there are some downsides there as well, though giving all your creatures vigilance is a pretty good, especially if you aren't necessarily swinging for lethal that turn. Making sure you still have some blockers on the following turn, especially if you're going up against another very aggressive deck, is something you might want to consider when looking at this card. So it definitely does a lot. I really do think it could find a home in Weenie, especially with the whole plot ability. And though I'm not generally very impressed with plot as a mechanic, because I don't really enjoy sacrificing my turn to basically not really do anything, not add anything to my board state, but maybe add a payoff that I could have on a later turn. And if it's because sometimes you won't even get there. So sacrificing a turn just to basically not add anything to your board presence or to any card advantage like the cards in your hand is not really something that I think is very good, especially when considering the play patterns in Pauper in general. But I definitely think that with the whole vigilance, giving all your creatures vigilance and +1/+1 as a free spell, not to mention you could also play things like Guardian's Pledge and other types of other types of cards as well. I think Rally the Peasants is also a card if you want to go more of the um, Boros Bully route with this card, which could this card could definitely find a home in those types of lists as well. So definitely a very interesting card. Really curious to see if it will get played. Especially when it comes to White Weenie, I feel like the lists are very tight, and a card like this does have a lot of competition with things that are already being played. One thought I've kind of had about this card that I'm not altogether certain about yet, and whether I'd want to try a build like this is maybe an Oops All Creatures type of build for White Weenie, which in that case this card would definitely fit in very well. And definitely your buglers would never whiff unless all you saw were lands. I don't really think that's the way you'd want to go with White Weenie, but it's something kind of silly that I have thought about, just as more of a theory crafting type of thing. But yeah, definitely a very interesting card here, and curious to see whether or not people are going to play it. All right, and that's it for today's video, everyone. Thank you again to anyone who stuck around to the end. Would definitely love to know your thoughts about the cards that we looked at today. Do you agree or disagree of my assessment of them? Are there any new white cards from the set that you think should have made this list? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.